Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions, your media questions, 7 days a week, and some non-media questions every once in a while. Go ahead. We have our first question. Sorry, I went off the rails a little bit there. Bill, what do we got?
I've been going through that all week.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just crazy time.
You get into this thing, you host the show for, 2,000 times or 1,500 times or whatever. And every once in a while your brain goes, hey, let's do something different while you're talking. And then you're just like, I'm now somewhere else. So anyway, go ahead. I noticed that with you, Bill, too. It must be it's the summer. We're just kind of in a summer mood, and we're just, as hosts, we're kind of going, let's try something.
I was in the middle of saying something, and I just went completely blank. I got distracted by some little thing yesterday, and it was like, huh? You stepped in. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, exactly.
Well. Guy Cochran, Seattle, Washington, has our first question today. What's the difference between Blackmagic Design's video assist monitor versus Atomos' new Ninja TX?
Good, Courtney.
Well, I think one of the biggest differences, I think this new Ninja TX has a transmitter in it, and the Blackmagic does not. Blackmagic has a recorder built into it and scopes and all that other good stuff, but this Ninja TX seems to have Wi-Fi, some type of Wi-Fi transmitter, and it also has a Bluetooth type connection for doing timecode sync between different units, including the camera wirelessly. It seems to be some of its new features here. Records up to 8K 30 RAW. That's pretty intense, and includes NDI 6. I do not think the Blackmagic recorders, video assist recorders and monitors do any type of NDI yet, and probably never will.
Yeah, it looks like it looks pretty feature rich. So, this new TX, I mean, it's more expensive if you're looking at the video assist. Well, I guess the video assist 12, but this is, I believe, is this a 5-inch monitor? That does this. I can't.
Well, the one I showed,
5-inch.
It does look like a 5-inch monitor.
Yeah, so the Blackmagic TX or the Blackmagic Video Assist is about $685, $650, depending on where you buy it. New. I use one all the time, so I have that little 5-inch, which I'm pretty happy with. But this one again, the transmission, being able to handle NDI, being able to handle 8K RAW. These are all things that are pretty interesting as far as a record. So it does look like it has more features if you need them. And the Atomos screens, I find that the build quality on the smaller Atomos ones are probably, they feel they're a little bit more plastic than with the Blackmagic versions. But I have one. I have a smaller Ninja, not this one, but I have another Ninja that I use as well. So as far as fit and finish, scopes, so on and so forth, I like the Blackmagic Video Assists a little bit better. But this one, the feature set is amazing. So, and being able to have some kind of Wi-Fi transmission so that you can see, so someone else can see it close by. This is not production transmission. This is convenience transmission. This is really for the director or somebody else to just be able to see something there. Go ahead, Courtney.
But it does do camera to cloud. So not only does it transmit an image, I think, over Wi-Fi, can maybe transmit to another receiver for like a director's monitor, but it also can then transfer your files, raw files, up into the cloud for camera to cloud, so it can offload your data, not in real time necessarily, but so when you've cut the camera, it'll start transmitting up to a location in the cloud so that your editor can have access to it, shortly after that scene wraps.
And I'd be interested to see. I think a lot of these, what they do is they're uploading the small. They'll do a dual record and record the RAW and an H.264, and then they're pushing the H.264s up in real time so that the editors can see them. And we've seen people do productions where the editor is literally getting those clips, and what they have a paper edit of the scene that they're looking at, and they're getting those clips as from camera to cloud and dropping them in and seeing how they work while the crew is working. It's really efficient. It makes the crew a little crazy. They're kind of like when the editor is sitting there giving them notes while they're still shooting. It hasn't always worked out well, from our experience. But it's a cool idea. I thought it'd be something everyone would do, but there's a lot of the crew that would like people not to look at the stuff while they're working on it. It makes them too conscious of what they're doing and gets them out of the space. Next question.
Tuomo Colonna from SPX Graphics in Finland says, I'm a vMix noob and I need picture-in-picture with a list of video clips in it with a fade transition between. And yes, StreamDeck triggered. Is that doable? Thanks.
I don't know if we have anybody here that knows vMix well enough to answer that question. Like today. Today is that's a pretty specific question. We're a little audio heavy today and probably less vMix today, but bring that back maybe on Friday and let's see if we can go it. We don't get stumped very often, but that one's specific enough that I don't think we have a solution for you. Next question.
Chris Dolan in Bradenton, Florida is up next. I'm looking to purchase a batch of camcorders for a corporate conference IMAG type situation, but ENG coverage, often in conference rooms with just ceiling lights. Is a 1-inch CMOS sensor better than a 1/2-inch 4K3 CMOS for poor lighting? And would you go with Sony or Panasonic? Thanks.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, the larger the sensor, generally speaking, the better low light performance or the cleaner, to be specific, the cleaner the image you can get at higher sensitivities, the larger the sensor. You don't state what the sensor or what the resolution of the 1-inch CMOS option is, because you want to take into account how large the photosite is for each individual pixel. So you want to imagine a grid on your sensor, and each dot on the grid or each square in the grid is a pixel. So you would want to think through how large each of those physical pixels or photosites would be. Between Sony and Panasonic, Sony is generally known for better low light performance, or again a cleaner image at higher sensitivities compared to Panasonic. But I want to say that, like, in low light situations or in poor lighting situations, the real solution is to add light or light the scene. Like, don't just simply pumping up your sensitivity or your ISO is a band-aid solution to poor lighting. The solution to poor lighting is to make the lighting better.
Good, Courtney.
And look at your selection of lenses. Also, the 1-inch sensor, the larger the sensor, the shallower your depth of field at wider open aperture setting. So if you're in a poorly lit room or you have no lighting, remember that you're, in a 1-inch sensor, your depth of field is CMOS sensor. It's going to be wafer thin. So you're going to have either good autofocus or be right on the Johnny on the spot pulling focus to where you want it to be. So that's a consideration. The 1/2-inch sensor would give you a bigger depth of field, and you might want to get a lens that can go pretty wide if you're going to be using it for handheld, because a lot of times you want to walk up to people or interview people and get within 2 or 3 feet of them, but yet in a conference situation or where you're doing IMAG type work, the cameras may be at the back of the room. You need a long lens to give a nice close-up on that IMAG. So make sure you have a selection of lenses that will work for you in either situation.
One of the things that Daniel Patridge points out is that the cheaper Sony camcorder models don't have a manual iris ring, so get one that does. Because I'm looking closely at the just announced PXWZ300 with a 1/2-inch sensor. It sounds like it won't be out until October. And the 1-inch sensor is going to look nicer. And in an IMAG situation, I'm going to assume that most of the time you have cameras on sticks somewhere that you're zooming in and grabbing stuff and throwing it up there. I don't know in an IMAG situation how much of a difference the 1/2-inch versus the 1-inch will make. I mean, I think the 1-inch will look nicer, but you may want to look at other things. Like the thing that's probably more important for IMAG is Genlock. So looking for cameras with Genlock that you can tie into your system, because when you're doing IMAG, delay, it becomes, your latency becomes a big deal. So getting those cameras locked into the system will save you sometimes up to 2 or 3 frames of delay. And that makes a big difference because people will look up. You can't delay the audio in the room. We can only do that for the stream. So it feels odd when things are off. And it always feels a little odd, but the IMAG keeps on falling behind if you keep on adding things to it that don't lock it back in. So I would look at Genlock before I looked at the chips themselves. Next question.
Paul in Washington, D.C. is up with us. And what's one piece of gear you'd personally recommend for converting both MiniDV and MiniHDV tapes to digital at home? Ideally, something reliable and Mac compatible.
I'll go with Courtney.
Well, I was looking for it, but I don't know if I can find it here. I have a thing called ClearClick that is basically an H.264 recorder. It depends on what you want to do as far as capture. If you want to capture, uncompressed video files, that's not the thing for you. But you might want to get something like a Blackmagic capture card to plug into your computer. In that case, it wouldn't work with a Mac unless you had an outboard card cage to plug in over your USB-C. But there are these ClearClick makes them H.264 recorders that have component in, especially for doing standard definition stuff and MiniDV stuff, 720p stuff that you can plug the component inputs into them. They have a SD card that plugs into them and it records directly in H.264 or H.265 to the SD card. No computer required, so you don't need to plug it into your Mac to record on the Mac itself. It records separate files that are MP4 files. So that's a solution for you. It also has HDMI in. Canopus used to make, there was a company that made FireWire connected digitizers that connect to your computer. And I used to use those for capturing from MiniDV and from MiniHDV. If the camcorder you're pulling it from has a FireWire 800 or FireWire 400 connection. But since FireWire is pretty much dead in the modern Mac, it might be a little hard to do that these days.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would scour the eBays and look for a used HDV deck from Sony. You can, of course, aside from playing back HDV tapes, you can also play back standard MiniDV. Most of these, look for one that specifically has what Sony calls iLink, essentially FireWire 400, and then connect that. And then after finding that deck used and also that cable used, or I don't know if you can still find iLink cable, brand new, look for an old Apple FireWire to Thunderbolt adapter. They only did that in Thunderbolt 2. So FireWire to Thunderbolt 2 adapter and then get a Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3 adapter. Then you can digitize using that deck. And I have indeed done this in the past to a Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4 computer. All those adapters chained together work.
I go ahead, Bill.
While these are digital formats, the tape is the old Mylar type thing. So I would say head cleaner, head cleaner, head cleaner. If you're using these tapes haven't been manufactured in a long time. They still shed stuff. And every time I've tried to go back to my old digital tapes and play them back, I can literally get maybe one playback. And I have to clean the heads sometimes 2 or 3 times in a tape. So they had wet and dry helical scan tape cleaners. You want to keep them both around if you can find them. They're pretty hard to find these days. But as soon as the signal, if you're seeing a decent picture off the tape, the signal in the tape itself hasn't warped or gotten into trouble. As soon as it starts degrading, give it just a second or two of one of those head cleaning tapes and try to get the helical scan little readers cleared off because they get gunked up pretty fast.
And look at how many tapes that you're actually going to digitize. If you're not digitizing more than, I would say, 10 tapes, there are services that will do this for you. And so, and I would take it to a service and let them do it. They have decks. They keep them up to date. They do this all the time. They know how to take care of your tapes. It's roughly $40 a tape. Typically to have these things digitized, and they're going to give you back a digital file at the highest resolution that you asked for, or that it can do. So, which is not very much. It's like, 640 by 480 or whatever, 640 by 520 or whatever that is that it was shooting at. So, but I would really think about if you only have one tape or less than, I would say 10 tapes, have a service do it. Don't go through this process. Your chances of you damaging the tape, the amount of time you're going to put into it, the amount of money you're going to put into it, it's not worth it when someone will just do it, and they do it all the time. So just think think hard about that. If you've got 100 tapes, that's a different problem. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas comes up next. How do you resolve ground loop issues with gear like buzzing and hum and so forth?
Go ahead, Bill.
So common mode hum usually comes from circuit problems and things like that. There are ground lifters that you can put into the things. There are also hum eliminators. Hum eliminators tend, in my ear, to kind of mess with things. But to lift the ground, just remember, do not do it by cutting off the ground pin on a plug or something like that. That is always a danger because sometimes in certain wiring situations, you'll get actual power that can get to the case of a machine and cause a safety problem. But ground lift devices are pretty common. Search for that on Marketech, any of those. You'll find some in hopefully the kinds of connections you need.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, there are different things that could cause buzzing or hums in your sound system or analog audio path. And one of them is a ground loop. And it seems like you have figured out that the hum or buzz is caused by a ground loop. If it is a ground loop, figure out which device is causing that ground loop, and once you find out what device in the pipeline is causing it, either have it checked to see if there is a defect in the device that's causing that ground loop, or it could also be caused by the powering of that specific device. So if ever, say, that device is being powered through a separate circuit that has a different potential to ground, then that's one reason why a ground loop may induce, may be, that may be one of the reasons why you would have a ground loop on that device. Make sure all parts of your audio pipeline share the same potential to ground. And that way, current would not use a ground path as its path to another ground potential.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and this, one thing I always carry with me in my little bag of tricks is several of these ground lift adapters, basic polarized grounding adapter. And it's that polarized is important here in America, if that's the type of connector that you have, because one blade is thicker than the other, so that makes you, even if you're plugging in a two-pronged plug, it makes you make sure the ground and neutral are not reversed when you plug that in. And this lifts the ground without having to cut off the ground pin. It has a little place where you can screw it into the faceplate of the wall outlet to ground it, and that's what these were adapted for, is adapting non-grounded outlets to grounded plugs. But this is the thing that you can use to do, as Mickey said, to go one at a time through your individual pieces and see which piece is maybe injecting that hum into your system and which is not. Another place to look for hum that comes into a system is power supplies. A lot of times switching power supplies, even though they're ungrounded, and just have a regular two-prong plug to plug them in for laptops, let's say they're 20-volt power supply. A lot of times the filter capacitors that are in those switching power supplies can go bad, and they can inject 60 and 120 hertz stuff into the ground of your laptop when you plug it in. And then if you plug the audio out, let's say out of your laptop into an amplifier system, then that ground can find a different ground down the line somewhere in your audio gear, and it's going to show up as a hum. So if you're using a laptop, anything with an internal battery, disconnect the AC power supply from it and see if your hum goes away, because that could be the source of it. There's also humbuckers, which are ground isolation transformers that have a transformer that comes in and a transformer that comes out. So there's no direct connection between the AC side and your power side because it goes through a transformer. That can eliminate ground differentials between the two grounds of the two things. That's what a humbucker basically does. It's a transformer connection between your two power sources.
Go ahead, Mickey.
And you definitely don't want to. A ground lift is there as a last-ditch effort when you're in a pinch and you need to solve the issue immediately, but you do not want to operate a system with grounds lifted. You want everything grounded to a common ground both your audio signal ground as well as your powering ground. You don't want to operate with your ground lifted. That's just like an emergency basis that you use a ground lift in audio hardware.
And we are spending a lot of time on this because, man, it gets everybody. This is something that, and so it's something that we're willing to spend a little time on here today because really understanding this problem. I mean, the thing that I actually know someone who, for smaller productions, they would be doing small concerts or records. They would run everything off a battery. They'd have these car batteries, like, I don't know, like 8 of them, and they would just have them all in this little power system. And they were like, I don't want to touch anything in the walls, so that I don't have to deal with this. They were so particular about it. But definitely sharing grounds, and in a lot of facilities, you'll start to see different colors. Like a pretty common one is orange. If you see orange plugs, oftentimes those are all sharing the same ground, and you'll see those both in studios, but you'll see them in hospitals because this is a big problem in that area too. It's one thing to have buzz; it's another thing to have buzz in a health environment. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the other thing to consider is where you get into ground loops most frequently is if you have 2 sets of equipment in different locations that are connected together with an audio cable that has a ground on it, let's say. If you've got a stage box that's plugged into a stage paddle source, on the stage, and then you've got something back at the front of the house that's plugged into a different source, those could be all in different transformers, and there can be a difference in the ground signal level between those 2 plugs, and it's going to travel. The voltage difference between those 2 is going to travel over your ground and induce hum. So a solution to that is run fiber optics. That eliminates a lot of ground hum between those 2 electrical, if you're transmitting audio between 2 amplifying systems that are in different areas of the building. The other problem you can run into is if you have a generator outside that's running the lights and you plug into an AC outlet on the stage that's designed for lighting, that has a completely different ground or no ground at all. Typically, they're supposed to drive a ground stake into the ground, but they almost never do.
They're parked on asphalt.
They're supposed to. Anyway,
I had a conversation in North Carolina with someone. I was like, where's the ground for this? We were having some issue. And he's like, there's asphalt everywhere. Where am I going to put the ground? I'm like, a wire over there.
Slam that copper rod into the ground. But like I say, they don't almost never do it. So the solution is to never power anything. And what I do is I always send the power out with the audio, not in the same cable, but in a separate cable that can carry the AC power to whatever remote equipment that I'm going to have at the end of that cable, so that I'm the source of all the ground. Everything in my cart is grounded to the same ground, and the power for all the remote boxes, like remote receivers, anything like that, comes from my cart and my ground. That solves a lot of it too.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Patrick Hinman in Longview, Texas. Occasionally, our stream to YouTube from an ATEM HD8 ISO will be out of sync online, but fine in-house. Where should I look to fix this issue?
Go, Mickey.
Yeah, this is a common issue with encoders built into Blackmagic design switchers. I've seen this very often with ATEM Mini Pros, ATEM Mini Extremes, and across the line with, again, Blackmagic design switchers with built-in encoders. Solution to that, don't use the built-in encoding. Get an SDI out of your switcher into a separate encoder. I'd even rather use OBS on a Windows machine than the Blackmagic design encoder.
Yeah, I think that I've only used the Blackmagic one a couple times, and it's not been for anything I got paid for. So typically if we're using the Black, and I will say the interface is very nice and it's very easy to tie in and make it work. But I don't have, we did, for instance, the little behind the scenes that we did from the studio, we did from the Blackmagic. It was just a quick, easy way that we had some issues with getting our encoders online, and so we just used that, and it worked. It worked okay, but I will say that we saw some issues there. The same things where you have sync issues. Usually, sync issues mean that the processors are getting overloaded for what they're getting more. And typically, where you're going to see that is where, and when you're saying it's in sync in house, I'm assuming that the HDMI is in sync, and what you're having the problem with is the encode itself, and that's usually, you're probably going to notice that that's happening when the camera is moving. So when the camera moves like back and forth like this, it puts an incredible amount of pressure on the encoder. And I find that the Blackmagic encoders don't handle that. It doesn't have to be a lot of. It's not like whip pans. I'm talking about just going like this back and forth with someone on a stage. There's a whole bunch of pixels that are moving really, really slowly, and that's a much harder thing for an encoder to, depending on what the background looks like. If it's got a lot of detail, it's a lot harder for the encoder to encode, and you'll see it suddenly spike up in what it's doing to manage that. And large encoders, or really well built encoders, will do that well. Smaller encoders, like what the encoders that we use for our shows start at $5,000. This is more than any of these switchers. And these switchers, this is just one little component on that switcher. So you're asking a very small chip to do something that usually we spend a lot more money and time on. And so having a dedicated encoder is going to fix a lot of these problems for you. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and like the times that these happen, people look at the A1 and be like, "Oh, audio's out of sync." No, it's leaving my house all in sync. Yeah. Well, it's not on my end. I also want to mention that nearly all the time that this has happened due to a Blackmagic switcher encoder, it has been with audio being later than video, which is really, really strange.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing that what's key is on site you have to have a monitor, and usually what we do is make sure that we have a monitor that the audio is embedded in the monitor. So you can either put your headset into the monitor, or it's got speakers, and we're testing our sync and we're confirming sync there with not a two-device process, a single device process of saying, hey, it's in sync, and we all agree that it's in sync, so that we know on site it's in sync leaving, and then after that, the argument is over the encoder and not over something in the pipeline. So it is worth going through that sync process to make sure that everyone agrees that we're in the right place first. Next question.
Next one comes from Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA. What are some tips, tricks, and knowledge bombs that you'd share with the younger generation working in live events about being on time? Bonus points for horror stories.
Go ahead, Bill.
Tell you my horror story. Once upon a time, I was doing talent work, mostly on air, but I got hired for a TV spot, and I was really excited about it. It was going to be my first big TV spot. It was for a dental group in the town I was living in. And so I thought, okay, the station's 15 minutes away. I'll leave a half an hour away and give myself plenty of margin. And I got in the middle of a block, and there was a car accident ahead of me. And I watched my margin tick away and tick away and tick away. And at the top of the hour, I was supposed to be there, I think, at 10 o'clock. I got to the station at 10:02, ran in and said, I'm so sorry, big accident, blah, 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 blah. I looked up on the monitor, and they had pulled the weather guy in to do the spot because I wasn't there right on time. I watched that guy work 6 years for that client, and I lost thousands and thousands of dollars. And at that point, I said, don't be an idiot. Go to a coffee shop across the street. If you have to be somewhere on time, do not risk being late. I got burned once. I told myself I'd never do that again, and that's what I've done from that point to this. It's just, you think it's just a little bit of time, but you never know when your little bit of time is messing up the entire production for everybody else. Don't risk it.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, make sure that key personnel, that let's say you have a setup day, and then you're going to set everything up, you're going to rehearse everything, and you're going to come back on show day. Make sure that the person who's providing that equipment doesn't lock it down overnight, because if that person comes back, gets in a car accident, like Bill says, and all the equipment is locked, or let's say the main computer that runs everything has a password that has to log in, and nobody knows it but that person, your entire show could come to a crashing halt if that poor guy has gotten in a traffic accident. So you have to make sure that somebody has the keys, more than one person has the keys. And the other saying we used to always have in union production is, if you're not a half hour early, you're too late. You always have to arrive a half hour early to get things, because when you get to a location, a lot of times if you haven't been there before, you may get there and discover that, the crew parking is 4 miles away at this other parking lot, and then you got to wait for a shuttle. The Teamster is going to shuttle you to the set, and that takes about 20, 30 minutes. So if you think you're going to roll in like 5 minutes before they're supposed to shoot the first shot, think again, because you may pull up there and you can't put your car here. You got to be in the crew parking. That's a mile and a half away. You got to allow a half hour for that kind of stuff.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, or you just to add to what the Courtney mentioned, you show up and the freight elevators fully being utilized by catering or whoever other department. So yeah, 30 minutes is on time.
Yeah, usually for me, I would aim. This is the math that I would use globally, not just somewhere in the city. I want to be, if for a production, I want to be 1.5 times the amount of time it takes me to get there. And I know that'll sound insane, but if I'm 4 hours away, that means that I want to be there 6 hours early. Like that's what I'm aiming for when I leave. Is I'm going to be there because there's too many. What I found DJing weddings and doing lots of other things in another life was that if I set that up, I was never late. And I was never late, and I had all kinds of problems, snowstorms. As a DJ, if you're DJing weddings, I did 400 weddings when I was like 22 years old, or 22 to 23 years old, and if you're late as a DJ, that means somebody had a wedding without some music. It's not a good sign. So I got very intense about it. But I do that even when I'm flying. So if I have to be somewhere that's a day away, I get there a day and a half early. And that is a huge buffer. But I create these huge buffers and for production, I'm not saying I'm always on time, but for production, I am almost never late. And my most common thing for even meetings is that usually I scope out a Starbucks or something. I think Bill mentioned this before. I scope something out. I get there an hour early. I go back to work. And then I'm nearby. When I'm doing production, I almost always get a hotel that I can walk to the venue. Like that's kind of the game plan that I have. Is I get I almost always have a hotel that is within easy walking, like 10 minutes of walking distance. I don't care how much it costs or what it does, but I want to be on, I want to make sure that traffic is not something that I'm dependent on to get to a venue, especially somewhere like LA or San Francisco or whatever. The other thing to know is that producers, and this is tangential to this, kind of producer's job is to get the job done, right? Not to scold you when you're late or when you're not doing the right thing. So usually you'll get there and the producer will go, "Hey, it's good to see you." And then they'll tell you what to do and they won't say anything, because making you upset does not improve the quality of their event. It's not that they missed it. It's that they're not going to make a big deal about it right now. And then you go lower on the list. Maybe not off the list on the first time. If you're late twice, then you're not going to ever be on a show again with that producer or with that crew. But if you're late, they're going to notice it. And man, you got to be on your job the rest of the day if you want to hang on to that job. And right now, I can tell you that 70% of the folks that I know in LA right now are not working. If you're doing production work, you really have to be on. And make sure that you're the very best, because these teams right now, I had a friend that just got off of a pretty big production, and he said, the team you can't believe the teams right now that are doing these shows, because it's so dry. It means that it's the best person for every position. He said he'd never worked in an environment where it's absolutely the best people every single time. Next question.
Brian in Washington, D.C. comes up next. The Silver Gen2 Magewell HDMI to USB converters are a good workhorse for my team that are still supported, but there has been no Mac utility app for them, and ours are a bit old. Is the USB Capture HDMI Plus more Mac-tweakable?
Go, Courtney.
Maybe not. It does require... I took a look at this, and I haven't tried it, but this is the new one that you're talking about, the Plus USB HDMI Gen 2 USB 3 video capture from Magewell. It's kind of pricey for $315, but almost all of these HDMI to USB converters convert to basically webcam type signal at 1024 by 768. They can handle different types of video, RGB 444, YCBR, and 422 and 444, and 8, 10, or 12-bit color depth. But I think in order to tweak them to those different recording formats or different formats, you have to have the resident app that runs on your Mac. And I don't know if they make Mac. If you say that they don't make the Mac capture utility anymore, you may have to go out and write your own, because they do have an SDK that is accessible, that you could use the SDK to use maybe use AI to tweak together a little control software for your Mac so that you can control it and switch it between different formats.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, I don't have experience with this specific Magewell UVC interface, but for their other models, they have the USB Capture utility available on the Mac App Store. So you might want to take a look at that and see if that works with your UVC interface.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Other than the Rupert Neve RNDI and Radial DIs, what other direct inject boxes do you prefer?
I go, Mickey.
Yeah, very, very popular option. Like it's to the point that people would call it a classic DI. Are the Countryman DIs. This is the Type 10, which is a passive direct box, and there's the Type 85, which is an active one, and they're very popular and also very well known for their build quality. They have videos on their website of their DIs being dropped, being hit by a baseball bat, being crushed by a pneumatic press or a hydraulic press. I'm not sure, but yeah, really classic DIs. They come in both mono and also stereo versions for both the passive and the active models.
As a note, one of the things that it's not really a DI box, but one of the things that I just ended up using recently, my daughter had to do a demo for a band, to be in the band, and we had to record it, and I had to record it to my phone. So I'm shooting with the phone of her doing some bass lines and so on and so forth, and I needed to figure out how to digitize her bass. So I needed, and also and be able to then had to pipe. What we did was we had the music on I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's one of those ones that breaks all the tracks out. So we took the bass out of, in this case, Rush's Tom Sawyer. We took the bass out, but we wanted to have softly the music playing in the background. So we were able to keep those tracks without the bass track, deliver it back to an input, and then have the bass come in, just plug straight in. And so like the question was, how do we do that? And we ended up using this little guy here, just in case you're interested. I had bought it a little while ago. This ESI Neve Duo. It's not very expensive, and it's not the highest quality thing in the world, but for what we were doing with it, it was a great little solution of being able to take that backing track, push it in quietly so that you understood where it was, and make it work. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting, it's not a DI box, but it was an interesting solution to get something actually into a phone. Next question.
Next comes from Martin E. Regan, the third in Dallas, Texas. Can someone recommend a Magic Arm that'll also connect to a Shure MV7, hoping to connect the Magic Arm to my wheelchair for a portable setup?
Go ahead, Courtney.
There are a whole bunch of these on Amazon, and they vary in quality and type of locking down. Here's one that I bought frequently. There's the right length, and you're going to have to choose one that's the right length, and you're going to probably want to have one with a clamp on it on the end here that can connect to the arm in your wheelchair. And then I would prefer one that has the single connection. There are many that have these multiple ball type connections, and so you got to have you can adjust the angle of each individual arm individually, but each one has to be adjusted separately with a separate lockdown. And those can get to be a bit tedious. The other thing you're going to need is an adapter, because they almost always have quarter 20s on it. And if you don't have a mic mount that has a quarter 20, you're going to need one of these adapters that are seen over here on the left, which convert from either a 5/8 inch plug or a quarter 20 to 5/8, depending upon what the microphone shock mount has connected on it. They also make some that have this single connector at the joint, in the middle of the joint. So there's ball joints at both ends, but this single connector here in the middle, you just flip that horizontal, that easy to grasp thing, flip it down, turn it 90 degrees, and it locks both balls at the ends of each of the arm, as well as locking the elbow that lever is at. So that's a lot easier to adjust, because you just have to release one and position the mic where you need it, and then lock down that one connector, and it locks all of the movable points in that arm in place.
Go ahead, Bill.
Arms are a critical factor. I think the clamp you use is equally critical. The two that I typically carry most of are basic Mathellini clamps or Cardellini clamps. That's the one on the left here. It has kind of a wider set of jaws, or the standard Mafer clamp. Manfrotto calls them super clamps for some reason. That's better. It depends on the point that you're going to mount to. If you're going to mount to one of the hand push round things, the Mafer clamps I think are a better solution. But anytime you need to go on a wider surface, I find those Cardellini clamps are much more stable. I'm going to assume you're going to put it on and take it off and put it on and take it off. If you're going to use this consistently, I would go farther and try to find something that's less bulky. These are kind of a hassle to have clamped onto something, particularly if you're going to collapse that wheelchair and move it around to other places and do things. I find that maybe it's time to pull out a drill and do something more permanent if I'm going to use something all the time for that particular purpose.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, in terms of what Magic Arm I would recommend, it would be the original Magic Arm from Manfrotto. They're heavy duty. They can carry a lot more weight than an MV7. But if you're looking for a Magic Arm, go with the original one. Pair it with a super clamp or another clamp that might be more apt for your use case, and you'll have a good solution there. But aside from a Magic Arm, I would also recommend taking a look at the Flexi mount from Dincon Systems. I use this quite a bit for rigging microphones, just clamping them on like tables or door frames or wherever I need to clamp a mic, a light, whatever I need. They're flexible, so you can easily adjust them. You can these are photos of some of their use cases: clipping a microphone for a kick drum, a shotgun mic. I don't know if I'd use a shotgun mic for a drum kit, but you get the idea. You can mount it wherever you need to mount it. It has a clamp here with little rubberized portions in them, so they can the grip is more secure. And yeah, you can bend them and flex them however you need them to be for your specific use case.
Next question.
Patrick Hindman in Longview, Texas wonders, would an ambisonic mic work in a room of 300 as an audience mic, or are multiple spaced mics better? He's speaking in terms of house of worship.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, a single ambisonic mic could work as a nice, very low bed, especially if you're mixing in an immersive format or a surround format. But I personally would rather have multiple spaced pairs or multiple stereo pairs. That way I have control of where they're panned across in the surround space or even as the stereo spectrum. If you use an ambisonic mic or even a surround microphone, you're kind of locked into the type of sound that you're getting and where they are panned. Yes, you can move them around, but if you're panning those channels around, why get an ambisonic mic in the first place or a surround mic in the first place? And also, it's important to bear in mind this is a single point of view in the auditory world that you're capturing, as opposed to say having maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 stereo pairs that are placed in different places in the room, some closer to the stage, some further away, maybe some up high in the ceiling. These different positions of your stereo pairs give you different perspectives that you can fade up and down depending on how you want them balanced, and place them in the panned around the room however you want. You're not locked in from just one perspective.
Do you have any issues when you do that of phasing, phase issues of getting at, that you're now, the mics have there's a lot of timing differences?
Yeah, if this is something that's that will be mixed live, then yes, you certainly have to dial in delay, and that's true with every single mic. You want to time your stage microphones and delay them so that there's less of a discrepancy between timing from those stage microphones to your room mics or /crowd mics. you don't want to fully time align everything because you kind of lose that sense of size, especially with microphones that are at the back of the room. You do want to keep some of that delay there so that you have a you
Because
you get
timing
that
is really what
slap
tells
back.
our ears where
It
we
tells
are.
us that we're okay. Like the microphones that are further away are indeed further away. You don't want to fully separate, fully time align them to the stage mics, but you want to lessen that so that especially the mics that are close, crowd mics or effects mics that are closer to the stage, don't sound phasey. But with a full FX mix, it capturing so much of the room already, and you're not pushing these very hot, and especially if you have
Right.
multiples of them, the phasing issue is negligible because
Right.
that's just part of the room. What you're hearing, things are bouncing off the walls, and you are naturally getting phasing issue or phase cancellation just because of that. That's just part of the sound of room mics.
Next question.
Next one comes from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. It seems some engineers use pop filters all the time. Some seemingly never do. Besides helping with plosives, what are their pros and cons?
Harshid?
So I think mic technique is important. You could hear the plosives, right? But it's the way you position your mic. I'm visually impaired. Regardless of having vision loss, I think they give you a different frequency and tone. Some people might prefer using the SM7DB or SM7B, and you'll find that the pop filter is definitely taller. And so when you're talking into the diaphragm, you have all that room and space for the air to travel. And so the little plosives and P's and T's and K's, like I'm purposely doing there, you're not hearing that. So I think the pros of a pop filter sometimes can be that if you have habits of maybe talking close with your mic, having that gives you that room of having better audio, but you might be dulling down other frequencies that maybe your voice may or may not need it. For women's voice, for example, they may have a higher pitch sound, so you may have a smoother sound because it takes off the edge of a higher pitch sound. The other piece that I could say, not having the pop filter as I'm using on my RE20 here, is that you get the richness of the sound, and having the mic as close as possible is always a better deal, especially if you're using a dynamic. And the way you position the mic, like the corner of your mouth, is a better position. So half the time, I think the challenge is where your position of the mic is, rather than potentially you're trying to cover up the plosives, because again, you could have a pop filter, but if you don't put that mic in the right place, you may still get some bad audio.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Hershey was precisely correct there. Whenever you put something in between the source of sound and also the microphone, you are filtering something out. And in this case, pop filters may at times, especially on cheaper pop filters, induce a roll off on the higher frequencies, the high end. Sometimes it's certainly which is the lesser evil, the chance of getting plosives in your signal or losing a little bit of high end. And in most situations, the little bit of high end that you lose is negligible, and if you do miss those, you can always EQ it back up. There's one thing though with affordable metal pop filters that are really cheap and thin. With those, especially on deeper voices, you oftentimes get ringing on the thin metal pop filters.
I used the metal pop filters exactly once because there was this ringing that it was like, and I was like, what is causing that? Like I was like, I couldn't figure out. Like I was like, there's nothing in the room that should cause that. It's the pop filter. There's a pop filter. So
Yep.
Oh my gosh, Courtney.
Yeah, a pop filter should not have a resonant frequency.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the important
Definitely not in the area that we can hear.
Frequency, and at some point, some frequency in your voice is going to cause that to resonate, and it's going to make a zing in there. The important thing about a pop filter is it be sound transparent, and the kind that you clip on like this that have kind of a woman's stocking stretched across it. They're pretty sound transparent. They don't absorb a whole lot of the high frequencies. They just get the low frequency plosives and prevent that from hitting the diaphragm. There's also the type that I'm using here, which is a foam pop filter. These are not as sound transparent as the pop filter. The foam is also a windscreen to some extent, not a very efficient windscreen, and it'll prevent plosives, and make sure that it's made as a microphone pop filter or windscreen, because it has to use a specific type of foam rubber, which is an open cell, which means there's closed cell foam and there's open cell foam. You never want to use closed cell foam because it will sound like this. It will eliminate almost all the sound coming out. And the better pop filter / windscreens are the ones that have dead air space. They have that thinner material in a foam, in a substrate that holds it around the surface of the microphone so that there's a couple of inches of dead air between the filter and the capsule. And the ones like this Chef's windscreen here do a much better job of filtering out wind noise and pops. But they aren't completely sound transparent. I will give you that depending upon the type of material and the thickness that's there in eliminating wind noise and pop noise. But you may have to eke up the high end. The Stellar X2 has a very crisp high end, and so taking just a couple of dB off at 15,000 hertz actually doesn't hurt my voice at all. So,
Bill.
Those of us who do a lot of voice work, we've kind of trained ourselves over the course of time to say P's and things like that without pushing out a lot of air. It's just a thing that we do as a habit after we've had to edit out tons of things like that. I don't use them very often. I tend to use sensitive mics like this TLM 103. And so sometimes it depends on the character or something like that. In the audiobooks, I might have somebody who whispers, "I'm going to kill you." And I don't have to worry about that. But if they come in and go, "The killer is Peter Piper," maybe that's going to be a whole different thing. So I always keep one around. This is my particular, it's a double transparent pop filter. If I need that, if I'm going to have something with a lot of P's and I need to keep my vocal performance up high, I'll toss it in for that line or two, and then I'll get rid of it because I like as much transparency as possible.
Bill, all I can say is that if someone whispers, "I'm going to kill you," I would worry all the time. Pop filter or no pop filter, I'd be concerned.
That's what you want. You want that little frisson up the back. Oh my God, that's scary.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What are the key differences between condenser and dynamic mics, and when is each preferred for studio versus live applications?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, in terms of usage, condenser microphones require phantom power, whereas dynamic microphones do not. In terms of sound, though, generally speaking, condenser microphones tend to capture more detail than dynamic microphones. An advantage of dynamic microphones, though, is they tend to, again, in most situations, tend to be able to take in more SPL than condenser microphones. At the end of the day, when is one preferred over the other, it depends on what kind of sound what kind of sound source you're trying to capture, and also the sound signature or the how you want that specific source to sound in your capture would dictate whether you go with a condenser or dynamic. Examples: snare drums. There are types of genres or music that you may prefer a condenser on a snare. In most rock and roll, though, people tend to use dynamics on snares. It depends on, again, what type of sound you want to have captured in your recording or in your mix.
Go ahead, Harshid.
I agree with Mickey, and having a semi-pro perspective of this, I think application is really crucial here because, again, a room, if it's not treated properly, your condenser is going to get all the different tones of your room, and dynamics take away the reflections. So I think application is really the key. And sometimes maybe a condenser might do you just fine, but if your interface or such that has the appropriate, let's say, noise assist, for example, then it could work just as well. But the main component, as I've been playing around with microphones and even condensers, I see that application is crucial. And if you're in a studio environment, dynamics would work just fine, especially when we're like doing a show like this, or perhaps you're doing a radio show. Dynamics will take away all the other frequencies that are not necessary, but just your choice is upon your application is where I would say.
Go to Courtney.
Yeah, the differences in the actual construction of the microphone actually affects the amount of sound that you're going to get out of them and the type of sounds that are going to be picked up. Dynamic microphones are almost always end address unless they're mounted sideways, because the way they work is the sound pressure waves hit the diaphragm, and attached to that diaphragm is a coil, which is moving around a permanent magnet in here. And so in order to move that diaphragm, you're also moving this coil back and forth, which has weight to it. And so it takes a pretty good amount of sound pressure level, in other words, louder sounds, and more perpendicular to the element itself, the diaphragm itself, to move that coil, because that coil only moves linearly. On a condenser microphone, it has a big diaphragm, but it doesn't have anything attached to it. It just changes. It has a polarized backplate, and the distance between that diaphragm and that polarized backplate change its capacitance, and then that feeds into usually an FET transistor, and that converts it to a voltage. That change in capacitance converts a voltage, and that voltage goes out. With a dynamic mic, it's generating the voltage. That's a little generator in the microphone itself. So it has to move physical things to generate that voltage. So it takes a higher sound pressure level to generate a higher level signal. So you're going to need more amplification with a dynamic mic. And it sounds best if you're perpendicular to the diaphragm, whereas this is the reason the condenser picks more up of the room noise. They're less directional because stuff can move that diaphragm from coming from any direction rather than just perpendicular to the diaphragm, which only can move in any direction rather than just up and down.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Ray Early in Los Angeles, California. Can you recommend a normal height tripod with a narrow base? They'll be in a fairly static position in a small studio. I'm just looking to conserve floor space.
Good, Bill.
The key thing you want to look for is look at whatever tripod you're looking at, see if it has a mid-level adjustable spreader or a floor adjustable spreader. These are tripods that have a little bracing system midway down the tripod or at the floor level, and the better ones, they're adjustable. You can pull them in and make it a smaller footprint or expand it out for more stability if you need that. There are a couple other ways you can do that with camera stands and things like that and make it very small. But generically, as you, I'm sure, understand, the smaller that footprint, the more tippable the rig is going to be. It can be a little bit dangerous. So those are my recommendations.
Go, Nikki.
Exactly what Bill mentioned. Look for one with a spreader. Specifically, I would recommend a floor spreader. You can keep it real nice and compact with a floor spreader. And if you put sand on it or put weight on the floor spreaders, it would be more stable despite having a small footprint.
And one of the things that we've used a lot for this kind of thing, especially when you said static. So if you're saying I have a static thing, I'm not moving it a lot, I'm not trying to do a fluid head, I'm not trying to do a bunch of other things. One thing to think about is the triad orbit. Oops, I got the wrong thing there. Pull this up here. The triad orbit. This is the T3, but what you have is a very low profile. This will open up in a couple different ways. So the angle that this opens up, I think it'll show it here on this. You can see there's slightly different angles that you can lock these into. So these have little buttons. I have lots of these. The reason that we bought them is because I was doing a lot of spherical work. And the problem we had is a tripod shows up at the bottom of my spherical camera. So I want that tripod to go as far away, the base to go as far away from the camera as possible so I don't pick it up. And so we found that the triad orbits, they're very heavy. They're not something you travel with, and they're very expensive. I think typically we paid, this one was the smaller one, but we paid probably $400 or $500 each for them. But so they're heavy. They're designed as mic stands, but they have a 3/8 on the top, and we found that we could just mount cameras onto them pretty effectively. So that's when I need to put something low profile right up in a wall, right up somewhere else, the triout orbit's usually where I go. Next question.
Kenzo Castagnini in Cape Town, South Africa says, how to fix ATEM-induced video lag in Zoom meetings since we can't delay the participants' audio and video runs behind due to the ATEM processing. I'm using a MixPre 6. Sync issues only occur when participants are out on program via the ATEM, but not for the talent.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I'll just explain real quickly because I'm quite familiar with the issues that Kenzo is having, and just so everyone knows, Kenzo works with Hasmuk in Cape Town, South Africa. They're what they're doing is they have both talent and the audience in the same meeting. They're pulling feeds from that meeting into their production system, producing a line cut on their switcher, and pushing the output out to the very same meeting. There's no way around it if you're doing it that way. What has to be done is your talents, the people whose feeds you're pulling into your production system, have to be in a totally separate meeting, or even a separate breakout room. Produce your show and then project your show out to the meeting where your audience is, or you can even turn it into a webinar if you want, if there's no interaction there. But they cannot be in the same meeting because you will have variations or differences in the length or the number of hops in the path for your signal flow between your audio and your video. The only way is to separate them out.
And one of the things that we've done there to kind of build on what Mickey said is that we have them always in a separate room, never in the same room. And then the second thing that we do is we bring people in from that main room to the area that they're going to interact. So, hey, there's going to be 3 people asking. We pull them over into that breakout room so they can interact. The more complicated way to do that is that we pipe the audio and video from the main room into the breakout room that the talent's in, and then build a back and forth there. That starts to have, there's a bunch of delay issues, a bunch of other things. This is where you want headphones, and you want a lot of things that have to be kind of set up there. But if you go down that path, that's a very seamless experience for people. Where now the one thing that you'll notice there, if you watch it, is that you'll see all the hosts in one window. And so sometimes when people are in Zoom, they want to see each host in each window. And so they're not going to see that because you're going to send the program back. So that's the only thing to think about there. Go ahead, Mickey.
And I'm just going to say this because I've been bugging Hasmuk about this for a long while. Hasmuk, remember about 30 seconds ago when Alex said that it's a bit more complicated. With this complication, you need to build mix minuses and all that. And it's about time you get a mixing console, Hasmuk. The MixPre has done its part. It's time to move to a big boy board.
And yes, and the console that we most typically do this process with is a QL1. So that's a Yamaha QL1 has been. Now they don't make those anymore, but there's I saw my first DM3 in the wild. I was at Blues at the Sage events. Or events by Sage, we saw. I got the DM3. It's a very cute little mixer. I was like, oh, I really like that thing. So anyway, it's cool look. Oh, there we go. Nikki's got it. It was smaller. The DM3 was smaller than I expected. I think that for the kind of shows that we do, the DM3 wouldn't have enough surface for us. We'd probably need more sliders to make ours work. But I think that the DM3 could work for a lot of basic systems. And I do agree with Mickey that once you start building once you start having this kind of problem and you start talking about lots of mix minuses, I built a lot of shows on 788s that like people said you should not do this. Like this is like all this routing and mix minuses and all these other things. So I'm very comfortable with the idea that you're going down of sound devices gives you all these routing tools that you want to use, but you do get to a point where a console is the way to go. So thanks to everyone with all the great questions today. What a great conversation. So great questions from the panel, both on the QR code as well as folks in Mukana. So thanks so much for bringing these great questions, especially the audio questions. This is our audio day. So thank you to the producers for that, and thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. A lot of great answers, great discussion that's going to help a lot of people move forward. We really appreciate your contribution. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end that makes this possible. This is not something that we just jump into a Zoom meeting and do. This is a small village that every day, 7 days a week, through every holiday you can imagine, we're still doing this show. We start to the second every day for 1,800. I don't know what the number is, but 1,800 times, 1,900 times we've done it to the second without missing a day, and it's because of the incredible crew on the back end that makes this possible. Today, if we had done this in person, the Tlaloc Traversal, we would have traveled 14,000 miles. That's 23,000 kilometers, and that is 113 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into after hours. Gotta go test I got a
New
barrel-powered PoE injector, which turned out to be a lot more complicated to find than I thought it would be. I needed to be able to deliver 12 volts. I needed to deliver 48 volts back to the PoE, and I needed to be small and not be plugged into the wall. Turns out there's like 3 of them. So I ordered one of them, so we'll see. And it has to be, a lot of them, the other ones are all 50 volt. I need 48. So anyway, let's see. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll be there.
Thank you, sound guys. You did awesome.
See y'all next Monday. Wish me well.
Take care. Enjoy yourself.
Right.
Yeah, you'll see if I survive another year of this.
Enjoy your Kamikamis.
Thank you. Yes.